Well, it's the start of doubleheader Sunday, so it's the second Sunday. We've got two matches. We've started to get a little bit of feel for each side, although DC's just played the one match, SRH have played two, so we've got a pretty good feel around how they like to operate. So what I want to talk about from a DC's perspective, a couple of massive changes really. It's going to happen on their side. KL Rahul will come back, and I'm pretty sure he will just slot in there for Rizvi at number 4. There's talk about he might slot up the top with Jake Fraser-McGurk missing out, but I mean, he's just had the one miss. So I think it would be far too early to make that change. KL Rahul averages 49, a strike rate of 140, batting at number 4, and that's he's played more than 5 innings there. So a good enough sample to know that he can step in, and I've been pretty big in terms of, I think that's a really nice conduit between a couple of really exciting players and Perel and McGurk, and then you've got Faf and KL surrounding them. So I quite like that as a top 4. And I think that could provide some consistency and also plenty of firepower for DC moving into the middle part of the season. So I think that change will happen. There's a little bit of concern around Mukesh Kumar, who hurt his ankle in the previous game, whether he's going to continue. We know that Natarajan is not fit yet with a shoulder injury. So they could go for Dashan Nalkande, who's had a massive season for Vidarbha, who went on and won the Ranji Trophy. He's been around the IPL a long time, hasn't played a huge amount, but certainly been involved for at least 6 seasons now. So he could step up and he could take the new ball and provide that third seamer with Starc and Mohit Sharma. And from SRH's point of view, I don't see any changes. I think the big talking point for SRH in the last game would have been Aniket Verma, who's just a new addition, has played very little, if any, full-time or elite domestic cricket. He's mainly from an under-23 grade, but 36 off 13 balls, including 5 sixes, when SRH were in trouble, shows that they've got another high-impact player to add to that already exciting top 5. So prior to last SRH's game, I talked about, there's a lot of talk about 300 against LSG, and I was relatively outspoken. I just don't think you can actually go into a game thinking about a score like that, and I'm not suggesting SRH did, but certainly there's a lot of talk amongst the media and fans that this was the game against a depleted bowling attack. And I think you've got to find a balance between trusting the exciting style that you want, and to be fair, they've got a very exciting brand, SRH, and they're going to play aggressively anyway. And to be fair, they already play right up to the line in terms of where that aggressive intent is. The challenge with any team is if you try and go too hard too soon, you can get yourself in trouble and you bring the opposition into the game. Whereas if you just play at your natural tempo, which is already incredibly high, then you might get 220, 230, 260, 280. Regardless of what the number is, you're playing to a level where you can push yourself. But I think if you start to go too hard too soon, you start to forget the fundamentals, and as I said, you can bring a lower side back into the game. So I think SRH, to be fair, I mean, Hesson got strangled down the leg side. It wasn't like an increase in intent that drew about those wickets. But I think from a fan's perspective, SRH are an incredibly exciting side to watch. It doesn't really matter what number they get. They will try and maximise what they get. And on a day, who knows, they might get close to 300. But the last thing you want to do is go out there trying to get it. You've got to just go through your fundamentals that you normally do. And to be fair, Abhishek and Travis Head certainly don't take many balls to line it up. So just make sure they don't get too far ahead of themselves. If they do, they will find that consistency of performance that they found last season. So, SRH are a good side. I think this game being a day game, spin will play a bigger factor. And just before the spin, we know that Starc versus Head is a great matchup. And those that watched the playoffs last year would have seen Mitchell Starc take Head a couple of times in the playoffs and indeed the final of the IPL last year. It just seems to be that angle from relatively close to the stumps. He can get it to tail in, he can get it to go away. We know that Travis Head likes to stay leg side of the ball, so it's a really nice matchup for DC, and I'm sure that if Head's taking strike straight away, Mitchell Starc will take the new ball. He might even take it anyway, but I think that's the matchup they want to try and force, is the Head versus Starc one, because we know if Head gets away, it's pretty hard to contain. As is Abhishek. I think, as I said, I think spin will play a bigger part, being a day game. I don't think the toss will be as big a factor. It will be warm, but I don't think it'll be too hot where you want to bat first necessarily just because of the heat. I think it's one of those, it depends what your personal preference is, but it's nice to go into a game where, as I said, the toss will not have a huge bearing on the game. I think DC, from a spin bowling point of view with Axar and Kuldeep, have more weapons, I guess, to play with in terms of them, and also Vipraj as well, who he just needed a little bit of luck in that game. He would have got rid of Poran and probably wouldn't have gone out of the park a few times as well. So, he's an exciting wristy. So between those three spinners, they cover a lot of bases, and if the ball does turn, don't be surprised if there's at least 10 overs of spin bowled in the day game. Whereas SRH, obviously, they've got the quality of Zampa. Abhishek, I think, could well be effective because he bowls so slowly. And the thing with bowling slowly is he's able to put a lot of revs on the ball. The ball can hold in the surface a little bit longer, so it might turn more. It's just he's got to have his control of length in order. If you don't quite have that control of length and you bowl slowly, it can be easy either to sit back or to get down to it on the half volley. So there's interesting matchups to see. I think, as I said, in a day game, I will always back the side, I guess, with the best spin bowling attack, which in this instance is DC. And I think with this lineup here in the top four, I think they've got equipped in terms of playing the quicks. There's a bit of power through there. There's plenty of craft through the middle there with KL and Akshar, and then the power of Stubbs and Ashutosh. And we indeed saw Vipraj as well bring plenty of power. So SRH, they're power packed down to 7. Even Pat Cummins can do a good job there. So I don't expect it to be quite as high scoring being a day game as it was in the night game. But Vizag is a small ground. So if a couple of guys get in, who knows? Anything is possible. But if it spins more, we might see a game more around about 180 rather than the 230, 240. And that could well be competitive. So pretty even game. As I said, I'm going to go with the side with the best spin bowlers on show, so I'm going to back DC in this one. I had a bit of a tough weekend actually. I was away at a wedding and came back in RCB, and Gujarat Titans had 2 great wins. 2 sides that I hadn't picked before the game, so I need to get one back. But yeah, I'm picking DC in this one. And in a moment we will talk about the evening match. And it's the second match of the doubleheader. It's the evening game from Guwahati. It's RR against CSK. Now both sides have played 2 matches. RR, we've talked about, they've been a little bit exposed in terms of the balance of their squad. Obviously, the dearth of experienced overseas players. And sure, Jaiswal and Samson and Parag have played quite a lot of IPL, but not a huge amount of international experience. Sure, Jaiswal has a bit, Samson a little bit, but nothing compared to the likes of Joss Butler, who has been there before. So there's a big difference between international experience, where you're coming and you're actually passing on your knowledge. And I guess that's the role of Shimron Hetmeyer, within this group. He was retained. And I think when RR were in trouble, they were 5 down at the end of the 10th over, so 11th over. And then they brought in the sub Shubham Dubey to basically protect Shimron Hetmeyer from that finishing role that he plays. Now for me, Shimron Hetmeyer, he's batted at 3 in the CPL. He's batted everywhere. But at the moment, he's well known as a finisher. But I think if you're retaining a player and it's the only overseas experienced player you have, surely he has to be able to slot in here at 7 at that time, be able to bat for 9 overs, construct the innings, and then be aggressive towards the end. And that's the experience that you're wanting, rather than putting that on to someone like Shubham Dubey, who's very much finding their feet. So I think RR will have a little bit of a rethink there. Now, they already made changes from the first game to the second, where they had Faruqi, who played open the bowling in the first game where he swung it. They brought in Hasaranga, where they talked about having Tiksana and Hasaranga as being sort of critical to controlling those middle overs and providing some all-round capabilities. And if I look at RR, there's a couple of little concerns, I guess. Rayan Parag, as I said, has scored all of his runs at 4. And I know it's just a number in terms of 3 and 4, but there's a big difference between batting against a relatively new ball in the power play, where you're supposed to attack, as opposed to coming in sort of near the end of the power play, controlling the middle, and then going whoosh at the end. And that's pretty much what Rayan Parag had done. So I'll say it again, but I really think that someone like a Nitesh Rana can slide up. Sure, if Jaiswal and Samson can get them post-power play, then Rayan Parag can come in at 3 there. So it is more about an entry point than necessarily a number. But I just see Rayan Parag as such a critical member of that side. And his batting in terms of controlling that middle will hopefully negate the fact that they don't have a huge amount of experience through the middle there. Now, Sanju Samson, this is probably his last game where he will be used as that impact player. Obviously, that finger injury hasn't allowed him to keep wickets or indeed field. So hopefully this will be the last one, and then he can take a full part and relieve Parag of the captaincy, which is a tough burden for a young man where you've got a tough struggle early on with a couple of losses. Now, they moved Hasaranga up to 5 to try and lengthen that batting. And there's some real rationale in that, in terms of, throughout his whole T20 career, he averages 18, strike rate of 144, which are, not massive numbers, but they are quite a nice figure in terms of if you get 20 roughly out of a guy you're looking to promote, it allows you, the likes of Dhruv Jurel, Shubham Dubey and Hetmeyer to control the back end. Then there's some good rationale in that. And they often did the same thing last year with someone like an Ashwin. But unfortunately, Wanindu has not been able to transfer his T20 record all around the world, which includes internationals, into the IPL. And in 15 innings, he's averaging just 6.9, a strike rate of under 100. So he is a better player than that, and it's up to him to show that. So if RR do the same thing and promote Hasaranga to look after the spin of the likes of Jadeja, Ashwin, Noor Ahmed through the middle, he's going to have to provide an innings of substance for RR. So that's an interesting one. Shubham Dubey made a nice contribution in the first game. He was, as I said, he was impacted in and batted ahead of Hetmeyer. So for me, Hetmeyer's got to step up and show that experience. Archer's opening spell, the first 2 overs, was certainly the best so far. He looked aggressive. Moeen Ali talked about how quick it was in terms of hitting the bat hard. Probably didn't have a huge amount of luck, but he looked like he was starting to find a little bit of rhythm. And then he came back at the end, and Quinton de Kock, took him out of the park when the game was already done and dusted. So, he showed some good signs. They will stick with Theeksana again and Deshpande and Sandeep. Now, they didn't really want to use Shubham Dubey. By batting first, they wanted to use, I would say, an extra bowler. But because they were 5 down at the 11th over mark, they didn't really have a choice. As I said, they could have promoted Hetmeyer and got to a point where maybe they did not need it. But at that point, they took out Kartikeya, where I think finger spin will be so critical at Guwahati. And we saw, in fact, that Riyan Parag bowled 4 overs for 25, just bowling his little off spin. So I would have thought that the likes of Kartikeya running his fingers over it, he can spin the ball a little bit both ways, could be very useful on that surface at Guwahati. So I would think they will once again, if they bat first, they'll try not to impact Shubham Dubey. They'll probably leave him out from the impact rule, and they can't replace him until Sampson's out anyway. So he could well be replaced, but ideally they would like Kartikeya to come in there. I don't think you can get by with just the 2 seamers. I think they definitely need the 3 of Archer, Deshpande and Sandeep, just in case there's some dew that comes in later on. So I think the side will be pretty much the same. As I said, if they bat first, expect not to see Shubham Dubey on the sheet. They could well have Kartikeya in there. Let's just wait and see. From CSK's point of view, they had a win early on against Mumbai at home, and then they were absolutely demolished by RCB, who were outstanding in the derby at the Chipok. They never really got into the game. Stephen Fleming talked at the end that he wasn't quite sure about how the pitch would play, felt that it spun more in the second innings than the first, and certainly RCB got off to a flyer and CSK struggled to pull it back, and then chasing a big score, the likes of Hazelwood, Bhuvi and Yash Dayal got early inroads into CSK. So they opened up a few wounds from CSK in terms of what that middle order looks like. And there was a real discussion about Dubey as well in terms of the fact he came in at 6. They were 3 for 26 after 4.4 overs, and that would have been a perfect time, I think, for Shubham Dubey to come in. Spin was about to be introduced. They were a long way behind the game, chasing 192 or something similar. So they needed a real impact. Sam Curran hasn't been able to provide that in the first couple of games. So, Dubey to me is a player that you don't want to leave too late. He needs to be able to control overs from the end of the power play afterwards. But if he has to bat the 5th over, then so be it. He's a good enough player to do that. So some discussions around that. There's also a bit of talk around Sam Curran's spot. And I talked before the last game, CSK don't like to chop and change. They've been really consistent in terms of how they've, used their players over the years. They always like an overseas opener, they always like the all-rounder, and they like to have a couple of bowlers towards the back end. So they're pretty settled in terms of how they look to do that. There will be a real discussion around Devon Conway because his opening with Gaikwad, their record opening is exceptional. And I don't think it'd be any issue with Rachin Ravindra batting at 3 because the power play is not where he does all of his work. He can do that work into the power play or through the middle. He's used to batting anywhere in the top 4 for New Zealand. So there will be talk about whether Conway comes in. If he does and Curran drops out, then Kambodge is a real option. But he was not in the subs in the last match. They named 5 subs. He was not one of them. So whether he has an injury, I'm unsure. But I would have thought that would be a straight swap. He could then slot in here at 9 because he has some batting skill as well. And they wouldn't miss out too much from a balance point of view. Vijay Shankar potentially could come in as the third seamer, but I think you need a little bit more than that at Guwahati, and they might consider Overton for Curran, slot Dubé up, Jadeja up, and Overton will come in as a finisher at 7. Dhoni will slot up to 8, and then you could go that way. So there's lots of different ways that CSK will go. I don't think they'll panic just yet. I think they'll give Sam Curran one more game before potentially they will look at introducing Conway, but time will tell. A little bit of a soft underbelly in this middle order here, and that's maybe why they're moving Gaikwad down to 3 because they're a little bit concerned about that middle order, the impact that they're getting from Curran. Dubé hasn't quite nailed it just yet either. They haven't got anything out of Huda or Tripathi, so Vijay Shankar could be an option in there, but as I said, CSK tend to not panic. But 1 win, 1 loss. But it was a pretty poor loss at home to RCB, so they'll be asking questions. It's a slowish wicket at Guwahati, so it will turn. As I said, it will turn for the finger spinners, so that will bring the likes of Jadeja, Ashwin into the game. Noor Ahmed will definitely be in the game, no doubt, and I think even Rachin Ravindra will bowl some overs on that surface. So, for me, CSK, I would still pick them in this lineup. Even though I am a little bit worried about this middle order, sort of a soft underbelly at the moment. They need form from Dubé, they need form from either Huda or Tripathi to give a little bit of confidence to that batting order. Otherwise, I think they'll see Conway come into the match. But for me, CSK will still be too strong for RR in this match.